They sent an entire army to stop him. It wasn't enough. No backup. No reinforcements. No way out. Just one man, a burning machine, and hundreds of enemy soldiers closing in from every direction. Bullets were tearing the ground around his feet. Explosions shook the earth beneath him. The metal he stood on was on fire, ammunition ready to blow at any second. And he didn't move. Most men would have run. Any rational person would have. The odds weren't just against him, they were impossible. But he stayed. He kept firing. For nearly an hour alone, wounded, on a burning tank, he held back an entire enemy force by himself. This isn't fiction. This isn't a movie. This happened. And the man who did it, he didn't even consider himself a hero. This is the true story of Audie Murphy, the most decorated American soldier in history, and the single day that proved one man can change everything. Before diving into that battle, here's who he was. Audie Murphy, born in 1925 in Texas, grew up in poverty and hardship. Small in size but unbreakable in spirit, he joined the U.S. Army during World War II and went on to become the most decorated American soldier of the war. Now, let's go to the day of war, the day that would make Audie Murphy a legend. January 26, 1945. The cold air of eastern France cut through everything: skin, bone, and morale. The village of Holtzwihr had become a fragile line between survival and collapse for Allied forces. Snow-covered fields stretched into the distance, quiet on the surface, but beneath that silence, war was building. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy stood with his company, watching the horizon. He didn't need binoculars to know what was coming. The Germans were preparing a counterattack, and not a small one. Tanks, infantry, coordinated firepower. This wasn't a skirmish. This was an attempt to crush everything in their path. Murphy's company was already weakened. Many of his men were exhausted. Some were wounded. Ammunition was limited. And the worst part, there was no guarantee of reinforcements arriving in time. Then it began. The first shells landed with a violent roar, shaking the frozen ground. Explosions tore through the silence, sending dirt, snow, and debris into the air. Within seconds, the battlefield transformed into chaos. German infantry advanced behind the barrage, using the explosions as cover. Murphy reacted instantly. He moved along the line, shouting orders, positioning his men, directing fire. There was no panic in his voice, only urgency and control. But even he could see the reality. They were being pushed back. The enemy wasn't slowing down. German troops kept advancing, step by step, closing the distance. Their numbers were overwhelming. Machine guns opened fire, cutting through defensive positions. One by one, Murphy's men were forced to fall back. Then came the moment that changed everything. Murphy realized if they stayed, they would be surrounded and wiped out. He made the call. He ordered his men to withdraw to a safer position in the woods behind them. It wasn't retreat out of fear, it was survival. But Murphy didn't go with them. He stayed behind, alone. Ahead of him stood a burning tank destroyer, already hit and partially disabled. Flames licked across its surface. Ammunition inside could explode at any moment. It was the last place anyone would choose to stand. Murphy climbed onto it anyway. From that exposed position, he grabbed the mounted .50 caliber machine gun. There was no cover, no protection, just him, the weapon, and an advancing enemy force. And then he opened fire. The sound of the machine gun cut through the battlefield like thunder. Round after round tore into the advancing German soldiers. Murphy didn't fire wildly. He aimed with precision, targeting movement, breaking formations, forcing the enemy to hesitate. But they didn't stop. The Germans kept coming. Bullets snapped past him. Explosions rocked the ground around the tank destroyer. The metal beneath him burned hotter with every second. Smoke filled the air, making it harder to see, harder to breathe. Murphy didn't move. He kept firing. Minutes passed. But on that battlefield, minutes felt like hours. Every second he stayed alive was another second his men could escape. Then he was hit. A bullet tore into his leg, sending a sharp wave of pain through his body. For a moment, everything slowed. The kind of pain that forces most men to fall back, to seek cover, to survive. Murphy didn't. He adjusted his position and kept firing. Blood soaked into his uniform, but his grip on the weapon didn't weaken. His focus didn't break. The enemy was still advancing, and as long as they were moving, he wasn't done. At the same time, Murphy did something almost impossible under that level of pressure. He picked up the radio. While firing the machine gun, while wounded, while completely exposed, he began directing artillery fire onto the enemy positions. Calmly, precisely, like he wasn't standing in the middle of a battlefield. Coordinates were called in. Seconds later, American artillery answered. Shells rained down on the advancing German forces, exploding among them, breaking their momentum. The combination of Murphy's machine gun fire and the incoming artillery created confusion. The attack began to slow, but it still didn't stop. German soldiers attempted to flank his position, trying to approach from angles where the machine gun couldn't easily reach. Murphy noticed. He always noticed. He shifted his aim. Every movement was calculated. Every burst of fire forced the enemy back just enough to keep them from closing in. He wasn't just fighting, he was controlling the battlefield. Time stretched on. 10 minutes. 20. 30. Still alone. Still fighting. The burning tank destroyer beneath him became more dangerous with each passing moment. Flames spread. Ammunition inside crackled under the heat. One explosion could end everything instantly. Murphy didn't climb down, because if he did, the line would break. And if the line broke, his men wouldn't make it. Somewhere behind him, the soldiers he had ordered to retreat reached safety. They regrouped. They waited. And they listened to the distant sound of a single machine gun still firing. Murphy was still there. After nearly an hour of continuous fighting, something changed. The German advance slowed, then stopped. They had taken losses. Heavy losses. More importantly, they had been held back long enough. Their momentum was gone. Their confidence shaken. One man had done that. When Murphy finally climbed down from the tank destroyer, he was exhausted, wounded, and covered in smoke and dirt. But he wasn't finished. He rejoined his men, and then he led a counterattack. Despite everything he had just endured, Murphy pushed forward with his soldiers, driving the enemy back even further. It wasn't just defense anymore. It was reclaiming ground. The same man who had stood alone against an entire force was now leading his men forward again. The battle ended, but the impact of what happened didn't. Murphy hadn't just survived. He had changed the outcome. What Audie Murphy did that day wasn't just bravery. It was beyond what most soldiers are ever asked to do. He held off an entire enemy force alone for nearly an hour. He continued fighting after being wounded. He coordinated artillery under extreme pressure. And he protected his men when retreat was the only other option. For those actions, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. But medals don't fully capture moments like that. Because what happened on that battlefield wasn't about recognition. It was about survival, leadership, and a refusal to give up when everything said he should. Audie Murphy came home to a country that wanted to celebrate him. His face appeared on the cover of Life magazine. Hollywood came calling. He became an actor, starring in over 40 films, including a movie based on his own autobiography, To Hell and Back. But behind the fame, something darker followed him everywhere. He couldn't sleep without a loaded pistol under his pillow. He locked himself in rooms for days. Crowds made him tense. Loud sounds sent him back, instantly, to frozen fields in France. The war had never left. He struggled with gambling debts, broken relationships, and a mind that wouldn't quiet down. At a time when soldiers were expected to come home and simply move on, Murphy refused to pretend he was fine. Instead, he spoke up. He publicly talked about the psychological wounds of war, something almost no one in that era was willing to do. He called for better treatment of veterans, fighting for them the same way he fought on that battlefield, refusing to back down. He died in a plane crash in 1971. He was 45 years old. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His grave is one of the most visited there, second only to President Kennedy's. Audie Murphy spent his whole life fighting. First for his country, then for the men who came home broken by it. He never stopped. One man, one burning machine, an entire enemy force, and he stood alone. Audie Murphy didn't just fight a battle. He proved that courage isn't about numbers, strength, or size. It's about standing your ground when no one else can. Do you know the story of the soldier who fought with just one hand and never backed down? To hear that unbelievable true story, subscribe to my channel and don't miss it.